Hey viewers, my name's Cara. I'm your host for Tuesdays here on the Pagan Perspective, and this week we are talking about open or public circles and community. This week's topic is from Pesky Pagan, but before I read it to you, and it'll be in the description as always, I want to give a nice warm welcome to all of our new substitute hosts. Welcome Tim, Eric, Meg, and Magic. So happy to have you here, and I will say that for everyone else who was waiting patiently to see when we would have new subs, it was a process. It's always a process. It's always a difficult process depending on how many auditions we get. We got more than 10 again this year. It was a process, but I am so happy that we have our 4 new subs and that they have joined us. If you haven't seen last week's videos, their first introductory videos for this channel were last week, so you can go back and check those out, and you'll be seeing them every month at Subs Week, if not whenever else we may need them. And of course, Angelo, our returning veteran sub, if you will. So, this week's topic from Pesky Pagan said, oh, actually, before I read it, sorry, I hate doing that. Clearly, as you will see, this topic was suggested quite a while ago. It references Beltane, and I believe it was actually submitted after Northern Hemisphere Beltane last year. So it takes a while for the topics to come up in the rotation. Now, it says, recently, a few friends and I led an open circle for Beltane at our neighborhood witchy shop, and we're hoping to do several more in the future. Do you have any advice for running or attending an open circle? What experiences have you had with open circles in the past? And do you believe it's important or beneficial to participate in your local pagan community, if you have one, or do you consider it unnecessary? So, disclaimer, I have not watched Rich's video before recording this. I actually started working on my video a little early this week on Monday, and it's taken me a few tries to try to get it to a reasonable length, because this is a topic that I could talk about for days. If not literally days, then at least several hours. And so this time I have not watched Rich's video before I'm recording it. I have no idea what he may have said. But we probably have very different views and experiences with it. Anyway, I have attended, led, and otherwise participated in and or witnessed open and public circles in many forms, with several different types of groups, paths, traditions, or non-traditions. So yeah, I have a lot to say about this, and this is my 3rd time attempting to record it. Anytime that I try to actually even briefly explain anything, the videos are like almost an hour long. So seriously, I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. And if anyone wants some like really in-depth tips on a certain thing, possibly ask me. I don't know if I'll have time to actually give you all of the advice that I have. Maybe eventually on my personal channel I will explore more of this further, but I have a list here, and even though I have it written down, it's been taking me forever to go through and explain. So what I'm going to do now is really just say things plainly and succinctly, and it might end up seeming really vague, and you might end up wondering what the story is behind it, but I promise you, if I even tell a short version of the story, this video will take 5 ever, because you've met me. So, first thing I have to say is the topic suggestion called it, or referred to it as, an open circle that took place at a witchy shop. So that is a very particular type of thing. An open circle, to me, that phrase, what you mean by that phrase, typically is that you are hosting something somewhere and it's an open invitation, meaning that you are aware and expect that people are going to attend who you don't know and who don't share the exact same path and practices as you. So you are preparing to open up the opportunity to people that you don't know, to practices that you don't know. as opposed to a closed circle, which might be like invitation only, or it might be like how you would refer to working with your own coven or grove or your specific circle. It tends to be people you know and people whose practices you're familiar with, and maybe you already have a way of working together as a group. So there's that difference there. There's also a bit of a difference between an open circle at a witchy shop, which maybe there was a poster hanging up at the establishment so that other people who attend the shop find out about the circle and they come to it, and you just happen to be the one leading it. And then there's an open circle that people might host at a private residence. So it might be you or someone else in your group decides to have a circle at your home, but you open up the invitations. And in that case, it might be friends of friends, that you expect your friends to invite other people, and maybe they ask their friends to come, but you're not necessarily expecting total strangers. Maybe there's a Facebook group that you're in that you say, you know, hey, I'm having this event, and when you tell me that you're definitely coming, then I'll give you my address. So you're not just like giving everyone your address. But, you know, so there are these slight differences. And then when I think of a public event, I think of like open public circle at, for example, a Pagan Pride Day event, where it's typically being held in a public place, or it might not be, but like my Pagan Pride Day in my area is held outdoors at a local park. So it really is open to the public. It's not just pagans or people even necessarily interested in paganism who are going to be showing up. It could be anyone from the city, anyone from the town, anyone who is visiting the businesses across the street or down the road, anyone who attends the church next door to the park. Really could be anyone. So there's a very different expectation depending on which type of these events you're leading, and some of my tips and advice here are more applicable to some of those situations than others. So here we go. Depends on if it's public or private, semi-open, semi-public, or semi-private, semi-public, open circle. Depends on if you have a large group or a small group. Some of these tips will vary depending on that. First thing, especially if you're in a large group outdoors, but this also applies in any case, make sure that whoever is speaking is loud enough to be heard and speaks clearly enough to be understood. And if you're like me, also maybe speaking slower than you normally do is beneficial, because not everyone can hear as well or keep up with as fast speech as maybe I can. Be loud enough to hear and clear enough to understand, but please don't scream at people. There's a story behind that from my personal experience, but I'll leave it there. And the difference is just like if you're a theater person, projecting versus yelling. You can project your voice while still having a normal tone, getting a little bit louder, and then there's just screaming at people, and you can scream at people in any volume, and I'm doing it very quietly right now, but obviously this tone is just more like screaming at people. Please be loud, but don't scream at people. Don't scream at people. A great side suggestion there is have a drum, or make sure somebody in your group has a drum or some other noise-making implement. Bells are good too, but drumming to get people's attention, to bring them to circle, is a great option. Or just walking around the event and letting people know, circle's about to start, please head over to the circle area, circle's about to begin. And if you do have people drumming, circle's about to begin, follow the sound of the drums. You know, there are many, many other ways to do it than screaming at people. If you are incorporating languages other than the language that is spoken by most of the people in attendance, most of their first language, one, I think that's awesome, and I think it's good for those of us who don't speak any other languages and aren't familiar with hearing other languages to see and hear things being done in a language that is not our own. I think that is fantastic. And if you want people to observe something like that, cool. Nothing really else necessarily needed. However, if you want to use other languages and you expect people who don't know the language and don't speak the language to participate in speaking the language with you, please do translate it for them. It is very nerve-wracking for people who are attending an open circle or a public event to be asked to repeat something in a language that they don't know without knowing what you're asking them to say. Some people might be nervous about it in the first place, but then if they don't know what they're being asked to say or repeat or respond to, that can be immediately shutting down, because they don't know what entities you're asking them to call in right now. They don't know what pledges you're asking them to make. So I think if they're just observing, you don't necessarily have to translate, and it can just be a good experience to observe. But if you want people to participate, please translate. And that goes for chanting or anything like that, because I've also been part of kirtan, call and response chanting circles in bhakti yoga, and a lot of the chants are in the original Sanskrit, and a lot of the times people want to know what they're saying before we chant it. It's just a comfort level thing. Make expectations clear in advance, whether just observation of the entire ritual at all is okay. So if it's okay for people to just sit on the sidelines and watch the whole time, or if you expect everyone in attendance to participate and to be joining in the songs and clapping their hands, walking slowly in a circle, whatever it is you have them to do, set that expectation ahead of time of whether spectating is okay or participation is required. I would say a big way to decide that is if you have a smaller group, like it's at a witchy shop or someone's home, you'll probably tend to have a smaller group, like maybe even 10 people or less. In that case, I would expect everyone to participate because it's a very small group to begin with, and if only 2 people are participating, there's not going to be much energy going on. It's not going to be very entertaining for everyone to watch anyway, and it's not entertainment. Spirituality is not a spectator sport. However, if you are at a big public event, it is expected that some people are there just to observe. They might not feel like they necessarily know what's going on or would know how to participate, even if they kind of were curious about it. So when I'm at Pagan Pride Day events, I expect that there are going to be some people kind of hanging back just watching, and that's just part of the thing being at a public event like that. But yeah, make that expectation clear ahead of time, save you a bunch of headache. Since the person who asked this said that they and their friends led a circle together, they already have a little leg up on this next thing. My next tip is to arrange readers ahead of time for things like if you need volunteers for some people to call the quarters or invoke the elements or invoke deities or other energies, ancestors, whatever kind of stuff you might be wanting to do, casting circle, whatever. It's good, for me, if you're someone who generally works alone and you don't really have a group or a coven or anything like that to pull from, I'm very aware that it can be a lot for people to just hear me and my voice constantly, and it makes it look like it's a one-woman show, and that's not what I want. It's not a one-witch show. So I will ask friends of mine that I know are attending ahead of time if they will call the quarters, invoke the elements, whatever. Sometimes people don't know how to do that, but they'd be willing to read something. So you can write up your own quarter calls and elemental invocations or whatever it is. I'm just using that as a placeholder, but whatever is appropriate in your tradition. You can write that up ahead of time and ask people, hey, when the time comes, would you be willing to read this? It's all written out. You don't have to do any work. So that helps make people more comfortable, and a lot of the time they'll be more apt to volunteer. You can also ask for volunteers to get up and do things spontaneously. That is a very different energy. Maybe that's something you want to do with people you already know a bit better, or like I said, if you already have a group of friends that you're doing this with, you can arrange those roles ahead of time, and then as more people start showing up regularly to your circles, start opening that up to them. Now that you've seen us do this a few times in a row, why don't you try to do it today yourself, or maybe think about next time you want to invoke this or whatever, let us know, give people a chance to join in. Similarly, any songs or chants that you want to use can be taught ahead of time. If you know them the time before, you can teach them at the end of one meeting to use the next time. If you have a Facebook group, you can share them in the group so people can learn them at home on their own time. Or you can teach them right before the circle begins, ask people to get there a little bit early to learn songs and chants that you're going to be using. Or if you want to, you can actually teach them right in the middle of ritual, right before you're going to use the song or the chant. I've done that as well. Big one for attendees and people leading, please arrive and start on time. Pagan standard time is a myth. It's a joke that we all tell. People always say, oh, people always show up late. Pagans can't be anywhere on time. Everybody's running on pagan standard time. It's a derogatory joke about our community, about people who refuse to show up on time and mess up everyone else's schedules. It's not a cute thing. Stop it. Stop it. Please arrive on time. Please be prepared to start on time. I will not tell the whole story, but one of my horror stories is when I was asked to lead a ritual at an event, and I was ready to go early so that I was on time, and the organizers of the event did not have my space ready and held me up an extra 20 minutes, and they ended up cutting 20 minutes out of my time to do my ritual and still expected me to finish at the same time so that I didn't mess up the schedule of the workshops coming after me. Don't do that to your guests. Don't do that to people who are leading things. And if you are an attendee, don't do that to the people who are doing the thing for you, because if they have an hour planned out, they know how much time everything is going to take ideally, and if you're late, they're already thinking, what can we not do? So if you show up late, you're cheating yourself out of some good stuff that they had planned for you, because they're probably cutting things out in order to get the time frame right now. Yeah, so if you are leading a ritual and you haven't already thought of this, I just mentioned it, walk through everything ahead of time and time it out so that you know how long everything should take. You should know how long you need for your circle casting, how long your elemental invocations should take. You should know how long you want your meditation or trance to last. You should know approximately how long it will take to lead people through whatever little spell work you might want to do. Whatever it is you're doing at the ritual, you should know how long it takes. So that if anything does happen, people really aren't feeling a certain thing, you can cut it shorter. Or if people are really loving a certain portion, you can choose to extend it because you know exactly how much wiggle room you have. Or if people show up late, 15 minutes late, you should know exactly what section of your ritual is 15 minutes long that you can toss, just in case, you know. Time it. Make sure you're not taking forever on parts that you yourself consider to be minor. If you want to take 20 minutes for a meditation later on, don't take 10 minutes on casting circle, you know. Shorten the things that you feel are less important for that particular ritual. There are short and long versions of everything. Keep in mind allergies and dietary restrictions and use of animal products, coming from a vegan here. This applies to a lot of things. It applies to anything that you might want to put on or in the bodies of your attendees. So this goes for like cookies. If you are baking cookies that you want everybody to use for the simple feast and you're gonna pass around cakes and ale, try to make them as allergen-free as possible, or if you know the people ahead of time, you can ask about allergies, but often if it's an open circle, you won't know everybody. So either be really thinking ahead and exclude any possible known allergens, or don't do cookies, because I can tell you it's very awkward to be standing in a circle with a bunch of people and everybody gets handed a cookie and you look around the room and you know some people are vegan and they're going, I can't eat this sacred cookie, and some people are lactose intolerant and they're like, I can't eat this sacred cookie, and someone else is allergic to nuts and alcohol extracts. So vanilla extract is in a lot of baked goods, so they're looking at it like, I don't know if I can eat this sacred cookie, and then it just becomes really awkward because no one wants to not eat the sacred cookie and offend the gods, but we don't know what's in this cookie. So tell people what's in it, keep allergies in mind, make it clear that it's okay not to have the cookie, or don't do cookies at all, because then it gets weird if half the people are eating the sacred cookie and half the people are refusing it. Then it just feels weird spiritually and energetically. So keep it in mind. Also, like, people like to use oils, people like to use incenses, people might like to use water infused with different things, and you don't know what people are allergic to. You don't know what foods they're allergic to, you don't know what kind of oils and extracts and essences they might be allergic to, what herbs. you just never know what's gonna make someone physically or morally uncomfortable. So think about those things in advance and try to circumvent that. Big one that I didn't even think about until recently. I'm doing a little better on time this time. A big one I didn't think about until recently when I was chatting with someone who lives in another big city in the United States, and they told me there are events that are held in their local community that they would like to attend, but because they don't drive themselves and they use public transportation, they often cannot attend the events that are being held in their area because they're being held at locations that are not accessible by public transit. So that's something I had never thought about before. And I do live near a city that uses public transportation. Cleveland has public transportation. A lot of people do not have their own vehicles and rely on public transit. So this is something that I wouldn't have thought of before. But make sure that your location is accessible to anyone who might want to be attending it. If it's not close enough to a public transit stop or route, you might want to think about having people from your group who are organizing it or some attendees that you already know, maybe ask for volunteers who can meet people at the nearest bus stop and bring them the rest of the way and then bring them back to the bus stop afterwards. So if you do have a Facebook group or something like that and people are telling you, I'd love to come, but I just can't get there, reach out to them and find out why. Maybe it's a public transit thing. Maybe you can find a location that's closer to a bus stop. Or maybe you can set up ride shares. So that's something I never would have even thought out before. Is the event going to be child friendly? This is important for both people who have children and want to know if they can bring them or if they need a babysitter, and also for those people out there who really don't feel comfortable being around children and are looking for their ritual experiences to be among adults, and they don't want to go to something that is all ages family friendly because that's not the environment they like. So decide whether or not your event is able to be all ages family friendly, child friendly. And if you're going to design it with children in mind, that's very different than designing just for adults. And similarly, if you're attending an event and they haven't told you whether or not the event is child friendly, whether you have the children or you're the person who doesn't like circling with children, feel free to ask the organizers. If they haven't provided that information, that's something that you deserve to know before you show up. Either way, like if you show up with your kids in tow and then you find out these people were not prepared to have children in the ritual, you're not going to want to turn around and take them home. Similarly, if you don't want to circle with kids and you're expecting to walk into a very serious, grown-up ritual situation and there are a bunch of kids running around and dancing and playing and you're like, because some people don't like that, you're also going to want to turn around and leave, and neither situation is great. So ask ahead of time. Other things you can ask about ahead of time if you are attending an event and you need to know some stuff. If they haven't told you about allergies, ask, especially like if you're going to a witchy shop type location that might have a resident pet. I've been to a lot of shops that have a resident cat and or dog or multiple. If you're allergic to those animals, you might want to know before you sign up for spending 2 or 3 hours there at a ritual. Maybe you can just plan ahead, take your allergy medication with you, or maybe that's a decision where you say, I'm going to have to sit this out. I'll meet up with you guys when you meet in another location. Or if you're meeting at a private residence, ask if they have pets, if there are any environmental, animal-related allergies that you need to be concerned about for yourself. Or your friend, if you're inviting your friend and your friend has an allergy, ask on behalf of your friend, please. Just think of all that kind of stuff. Ask the organizers if you can bring anything. If they are asking people to bring food or drink or items for the altar or anything like that. Another thing, Thorn Mooney even mentions this in her book. I think that sometimes people think this is a joke or that we're being funny, but this is a real thing. Toilet paper. If you are meeting at a private residence or even at a witchy shop, the people who live in that space or live and work in that space and own that space have to buy things like toilet paper. And if they're having a bunch of people over who are using the bathroom, it could be a nice gesture to bring an extra roll of toilet paper or two to help make up for what all of these strangers coming into their space are using up, you know, it costs money. So that's a real thing. I think some people think that that's a joke, but that's real. Ask if there's anything like a dress code, anything that you should know about. Admittedly, I think of this because it applies to a private group that I've gone to some open, guest-friendly, not open circles, but invitation only to their friends. Circles for Sabbats and things with a traditional coven that my friend runs. This applies to them, so I think of it. So there might be groups that you're attending that their tradition or practice might have restrictions on what you can wear. They might have certain colors that you do or do not wear in circle, certain metals or types of jewelry that only the high priest and priestess can wear or that nobody wears because they are either sacred to the gods or not something that you want to have around. If you're going to a ritual that is revolving around the Fae, probably don't bring anything made of iron, that kind of stuff. Some people do not wear shoes in circle. So just anything like that. If it's a situation where you think that might be applicable, ask the organizers ahead of time if they haven't mentioned anything. Is there a dress code? Ask if you're allowed to bring guests if they haven't said. And if you are bringing guests, tell the hosts how many you are bringing so they can plan ahead. That's very helpful. Last piece of advice for attending an open circle, come with an open mind and an open heart. It's an open circle, so we should be open because as I mentioned way at the beginning of this, when it's open, it means we don't know who's going to show up. We don't know what their path is. We don't know what their views are, but we know we're all showing up to try to do something together, and that requires a bit of compromise. It requires opening up. I have actually been to a couple little circles in my time where someone who was in attendance clearly was not told ahead of time how an open circle works and that other people don't practice the same way they do, because I've experienced some people going to these types of events and like closing up and getting really upset, and then when we're like, what's wrong? Excuse me, getting a very dry throat. And my water's over there out of reach, of course. And when we ask what's wrong, they say, they're doing this wrong. And it's like, what do you mean they're doing it wrong? Well, you're not supposed to do it like that. That's completely wrong. That's an affront to the gods, or, you know, that's completely offensive to my ancestors and my tradition. And it's like, well, we don't all follow the same path and the same tradition here. So seriously, I don't know what happens. People end up at these events and they don't know that not everyone does it the same way. And so, yeah, don't be that person. If you're watching this channel, you're probably not that person anyway. But if you're inviting a friend and maybe they've never been exposed to all the different, just like tell them ahead of time, like, by the way, just so you know, it's not going to be the same as everything. We're here to experience new ways of doing things and maybe learn some new stuff that we like. Maybe not, at least we're learning how other people do things. But like, please don't show up to an open circle and like be angry because they're doing it a way that you don't do it. That's not what it's about, please. Please. Okay, that's all my tips. So the last thing, and I'm doing better on time. Half an hour is not bad. All right, happy. It's a new day. All right, the last thing, the end of the topic said, do you believe it's important or beneficial to participate in your local pagan community if you have one, or do you consider it unnecessary? Short answer for me is yes. Slightly longer answer for me is it actually depends on what you mean by community, because I think of community as separate things. I think that different people use the term in different ways. The same people even use it in different ways. I use the word in different ways. And so a fuller response from me would depend on which aspect of community you're asking about. But really, it's a yes either way. It's just my more in-depth feelings about each type. So I'll probably talk more in depth about this on my personal channel at a later date, or maybe even here, maybe it'll come up, because community is a big thing that came up for me last year in 2018. And it's something that I haven't really talked about in a video yet, but I've been, mulling around in my head for a year. And so basically, sneak preview of that thought process is there's the way we use community that means a localized group within an area. So this is like how we might refer to the YouTube pagan community, or the Ohio pagan community, or even the United States pagan community, or the UK pagan community, whatever. And we're saying community, but what we really mean there is a demographic. We're talking about people who are part of that localized area, either a geographical location or an internet location, like YouTube, like a certain platform, and the people who are part of that group who identify as pagan. So the YouTube pagan community is pagans on YouTube, or people on YouTube who identify as pagan, or people who make YouTube videos about paganism. Then there's the version of community that really refers to a closer group of people who know each other, who work together, who are somewhat invested in each other's lives, who actually know stuff about each other, stuff like that. So there can be smaller, closer knit communities within these larger localized communities. But that's two major different ways that I see people using the term. So people will talk about like the Ohio pagan community. That's a demographic. I don't know all the pagans in Ohio. I've never met them. I don't work with most of them, Then there's the community that's like a coven is a community, and a grove is a community. People who attend the same church are a community. Some people will refer to the people who live in my neighborhood as a community, my community, but again, that's more of a localized region. That's people who live in my neighborhood, right? That's a demographic. You might not necessarily know those people. If you do know those people, and you're close, and you actually commune together in unity, community is more of a thing that I think we can use to describe that. So those are the two big differences for me. Sneak preview. I'm starting to not be able to talk, so we're done. Yeah, but short answer, yes. I think that either one of those is important to participate in. This one specifically is something that I don't feel that I've ever had, really, in a very close sense. We have somewhat of a semblance of that here as the Pagan Perspective team. I try to get to know the people on my team. I stick up for them. I care about their lives. When we talk to each other about stuff, we treat each other like a family. So we try to create that bit of community there for ourselves, but it's not something that really exists in my waking life, my physical life and my reality. That's not really a thing that happens a lot in my area that I've been able to be a part of. Other people have it, I don't. And I believe that when we don't have it, if we want it, if we do find it valuable and beneficial, which I do, that if it doesn't already exist, we need to work for it. And that's something that I'm trying to do. On the other hand, there's this localized one, and I also participate in my localized community by attending pride events, going to witchy businesses, getting to know the people who run them, supporting those businesses by purchasing things from them, and I sign up to present workshops and lead rituals and stuff like that, and actually provide content for my localized community. Most of the people that I meet in those situations never become this closer definition of community, but they are people who live in my area who follow a similar path, and I do participate in that wider community. So I think either one of these is important and beneficial, and a lot of us don't do it enough. Thank you for watching. You can let us know your thoughts on this topic in the comments, or if you have a lot to say about it, like me, you can make a video as a response to any of our videos this week. Doesn't have to be to me directly. And let us know that it's there, and let the other viewers know that it's there. Leave a comment saying, hey, on my channel there's a video called this. Tell us the title. People can go to your channel and check it out and see what you had to say too. Join the conversation. Join the community. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.